Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Reality, Part 2, The Task of Seeing, Chapter 15. I began the exercise of listening to the sounds of the world and kept at it for 2 months, as Don Juan had specified. It was excruciating at first to listen and not look, but even more excruciating was not to talk to myself. By the end of 2 months, I was capable of shutting off my internal dialogue for short periods of time, and I was also capable of paying attention to sounds. I arrived at Don Juan's house at 9 a.m. on November 10th, 1969. "We should start that trip right now," he said upon my arrival at his house. I rested for an hour, and then we drove toward the low slopes of the mountains to the east. We left my car in the care of his friends who lived in the area while we hiked into the mountains. Don Juan had put some crackers and sweet rolls in a knapsack for me. They were enough provisions for a day or two. I had asked Don Juan if we needed more. He shook his head negatively. We walked the entire morning. It was rather warm. It was a rather warm day. I carried 1 canteen of water, most of which I drank myself. Don Juan drank only twice. When there was no more water, he assured me that it was all right to drink from the streams we found on our way. He laughed at my reluctance. After a short while, my thirst made me overcome my fears. In the early afternoon, we stopped in a small valley at the bottom of some lush green hills. Behind the hills, toward the east, the high mountains were silhouetted against a cloudy sky. "You can think, you can write about what we say or about what you perceive, but nothing about where we are," he said. We rested for a while, and then he took a bundle from inside his shirt. He untied it and showed me his pipe. He filled its bowl with a smoking mixture, lighted a match, and kindled a small dry twig, placed the burning twig inside the bowl, and told me to smoke. Without a piece of charcoal inside the bowl, it was difficult to light the pipe. We had to keep kindling the twigs until the mixture caught fire. When I had finished smoking, he said when I had finished smoking, he said that we were there so I could find out the kind of game I was supposed to hunt. He carefully repeated 3 or 4 times that the most important aspect of my endeavor was to find some holes. He emphasized the word holes and said that inside them a sorcerer could find all sorts of messages and directions. I wanted to ask what kind of holes they were. Don Juan seemed to have guessed my question and said they were impossible to describe and were in the realm of seeing. He repeated at various times that I should focus all my attention on listening to sounds and do my best to find the holes between the sounds. He said that he was going to play his spirit catcher 4 times. I was supposed to use those eerie calls as a guide to the ally that had welcomed me. That ally would then give me the message I was seeking. Don Juan told me that I should stay in complete alertness, since he had no idea how the ally would manifest himself to me. I listened attentively. I was sitting with my back against the rock side of the hill. I experienced a mild numbness. Don Juan warned me against closing my eyes. I began to listen, and I could distinguish the whistling of the birds, the wind rustling the leaves, the buzzing of insects, and as I placed my individual attention on those sounds, I could actually make out 4 different types of bird whistlings. I could distinguish the speeds of the wind in terms of slow, fast. I could also hear the different rustlings of 3 types of leaves. The buzzings of insects were dazzling. There were so many that I could not count them or correctly differentiate them. I was immersed in a strange world of sound I had never been in my life. I began to slide to my right. Don Juan made a motion to stop me, but I caught myself before he did. I straightened up and sat erect again. Don Juan moved my body until he propped me on a crevice in a rock wall. He kept the small rocks from under my legs. He swept the small rocks from under my legs and placed the back of my head against the rock. He told me imperatively to look at the mountains to the southeast. I fixed my gaze in the distance, but he corrected me and said that I should not gaze but look, sort of scanning at the hills in front of me and at the vegetation on them. He repeated over and over that I should concentrate all my attention on my hearing. Sounds began to be prominent again. It was not so much that I wanted to hear them. Rather, they had a way of forcing me to concentrate on them. The wind rustled the leaves. The wind came high above the trees, and then it dropped into the valley where we were. Upon dropping, it touched the leaves of the tall trees first, then made a peculiar sound which I fancied to be a sort of rich, raspy, lush sound. Then the wind hit the bushes, and their leaves sounded like a crowd of small things. It was an almost melodious sound, very engulfing and quite demanding. It seemed capable of drowning everything else. I found it displeasing. I felt embarrassed because it occurred to me that I was like the rustle of the bushes, nagging and demanding. The sound was so akin to me that I hated it. Then I heard the wind rolling on the ground. It was not a rustling sound, but more of a whistle, almost a beep or a flat buzz. Listening to the sounds of the wind was making, I realized that all three of them happened at once. I was wondering how I had been capable of isolating each of them when I again became aware of the whistling of the birds and the buzzing of insects. At one moment they were only the sounds of the wind, and in the next moment a gigantic flow of other sounds emerged at once into my field of awareness. Logically, all the existing sounds must have been continually emitted during the time I was hearing only the wind. I could not count all the whistles of birds or buzzes of insects, yet I was convinced I was listening to each separate sound as it was produced. Together they created a most extraordinary order. I cannot call it any other thing but order. It was an order of sounds that had a pattern. That is, every sound happened in sequence. Then I heard a unique prolonged wail. It made me shiver. Every other noise ceased for an instant, and the valley was dead still as the reverberation of the wail reached the valley's outer limits. Then the noises began again. I picked up their pattern immediately. After a moment of attentive listening, I thought I understood Don Juan's recommendation to watch for the holes between the sounds. The pattern of noises had spaces in between sounds. For example, specific whistles of birds were timed and had pauses in between them, and so had all the other sounds I was perceiving. The rustling of leaves was like a binding glue that made them into a homogeneous buzz. The fact of the matter was that the timing of each sound was a unit in the overall pattern of sounds. Thus, the spaces or the pauses in between sounds were, if I paid attention to them, holes in a structure. I heard again the piercing wail of Don Juan's spirit catcher. It did not jolt me, but the sounds again ceased for an instant, and I perceived such a cessation as a hole, a very large hole. And at that precise moment, I shifted my attention from hearing to looking. I was looking at a cluster of low hills with lush green vegetation. The silhouette of the hills was arranged in such a way that from the place where I was looking, there seemed to be a hole on the side of one of the hills. It was a space in between two hills, and through it I could see the deep, dark, gray hue of the mountains in the distance. For a moment I did not know what it was. It was as if the hole I was looking at was the hole in the sound. Then the noises began again, but the visual image of the huge hole remained. A short while later, I became even more keenly aware of the patterns of sounds in their order and the arrangement of their pauses. My mind was capable of distinguishing and discriminating among an enormous number of individual sounds. I could actually keep track of all the sounds, thus each pause between sounds was a definite whole. At a given moment, the pauses became crystallized in my mind and formed a sort of solid grid, a structure. I was not seeing or hearing it. I was feeling it with some unknown part of myself. Don Juan played his string once again. The sounds ceased as they had done before, creating a huge hole in the sound structure. This time, however, that big pause blended with the hole in the hills I was looking at. They became superimposed on each other. The effect of perceiving two holes lasted for such a long time that I was capable of seeing/hearing their contours as they fit one another. Then the other sounds began again, and their structure of pauses became an extraordinary, almost visual perception. I began seeing the sounds as they created patterns, and then all those patterns became superimposed on the environment in the same way I had perceived the two big holes becoming superimposed. I was not looking or hearing as I was accustomed to doing. I was doing something which was entirely different, but combined features of both. For some reason, my attention was focused on the large hole in the hills. I felt I was hearing it, and at the same time looking at it. There was something of a lure about it. It dominated my field of perception, and every single sound pattern, which coincided with the feature of the environment, was hinged on that hole. I heard one more eerie wail of Don Juan's spirit catcher. All other sounds stopped, and two large holes seemed to light up, and next I was looking again at a plowed field. The ally was standing there as I had seen him before. The light of the total scene became very clear. I could see him plainly, as if he were 50 yards away. I could not see his face. His hat covered it. Then he began to come towards me, lifting up his head slowly as he walked. I could almost see his face, and that terrified me. I knew I had to stop him without delay. I had a strange surge in my body. I felt an outflow of power. I wanted to move my head to the side to stop the vision, but I could not do it. At that crucial instant, a thought came to my mind. I knew what Don Juan meant when he spoke of items of a path with heart being shields. There was something I wanted to do in my life, something very consuming and intriguing, something that filled me with great peace and joy. I knew the ally could not overcome me. I moved my head away without any trouble before I could see his entire face. I began hearing all the other sounds. They actually became very loud and shrill, as if they were actually angry with me. They lost their patterns and turned into an amorphous conglomerate of sharp, painful shrieks. My ears began to buzz under their pressure. I felt that my head was about to explode. I stood up and put the palms of my hands to my ears. Don Juan helped me walk to a very small stream, made me take off my clothes, and rolled me in the water. He made me lie on an almost dry bed of the stream, and then gathered water in his hat and splashed me with it. The pressure of my ears subsided very rapidly, and it took only a few minutes to wash me. Don Juan looked at me, shook his head in approval, and said I had made myself solid in no time at all. I put on my clothes, and he took me back to the place where I had been sitting. I felt extremely vigorous, buoyant, and clear-headed. He wanted to know all the details of my vision. He said that the holes in the sounds were used by sorcerers to find out specific things. A sorcerer's ally would reveal complicated affairs through the holes in the sounds. He refused to be more specific about the holes and sloughed off my questions, saying that since I did not have an ally, any information would only be harmful to me. Everything is meaningful for a sorcerer, he said. For a sorcerer. The sounds have holes in them, and so does everything around you. Ordinarily, a man does not have the speed to catch the holes, and thus he goes through life without protection. The worms, the birds, the trees, all of them can tell us unimaginable things if only one could have the speed to grasp their message. The smoke can give us that grasping speed, but we must be on good terms with all the living things of this world. This is the reason why we must talk to plants we are about to kill, and to apologize for hurting them. The same thing must be done with the animals we are going to hunt. We should take only enough for our needs. Otherwise, the plants and the animals and the worms we have killed would turn against us and cause us disease and misfortune. A warrior is aware of this and strives to appease them. So when he peers through the holes, the trees and the birds and the worms give him truthful messages. But all this is not important now. What is important is that you saw the ally. That is your game. I've told you that we were going to hunt for something. I thought it was going to be an animal. I figured that you were going to see an animal we had to hunt. I myself saw a wild boar. My spirit catcher is a wild boar. Do you mean that your spirit catcher is made out of a wild boar? No, nothing in the life of a sorcerer is made out of anything else. If something is anything at all, it is the thing itself. If you knew wild boars, you would realize my spirit catcher is one. Why did we come here to hunt? The ally showed you a spirit catcher that he got from his pouch. You need to have one if you are going to call him. What is a spirit catcher? It is a fiber. With it, I can call the allies, or my own ally. Or I can call the spirits of waterholes, the spirits of rivers, the spirits of mountains. Mine is a wild boar and cries like a wild boar. I used it twice around you to call the spirit of the waterhole to help you. The spirit came to you as the ally came to you today. You could not see it, though, because you did not have the speed. However, that day I took you to the water canyon and put you on a rock you knew. You knew the spirit was almost on top of you without actually seeing it. Those spirits are helpers. They are hard to handle and sort of dangerous. One needs an impeccable will to hold them at bay. What do they look like? They are different for every man, and so are the allies. For you, an ally would apparently look like a man you once knew, or like a man you will always be about to know. That's the bent of your nature. You are given to mysteries and secrets. I am not like you, so an ally, for me, is something very precise. The spirits of waterholes are proper to specific places. The one I called to help you is one I have known myself. It has helped me many times. Its abode is in that canyon. At the time I called it to help you, you were not strong, and the spirit took you hard. That was not its intention. They have none. But you were lying there very weak, weaker than I suspected. Later on, the spirit nearly lured you to your death. In the water at the irrigation canal, you were phosphorescent. The spirit took you by surprise, and you nearly succumbed. Once the spirit does that, it always comes back for its prey. I'm sure it will come back for you. Unfortunately, you need the water to become solid again when you use the little smoke. That puts you at a terrible disadvantage. If you don't use the water, you will probably die. But if you do use it, the spirit will take you. Can I use water at another place? It doesn't make any difference. The spirit of water, the water hole around my house, can follow you anywhere, unless you have a spirit catcher. That is why the ally showed it to you. He told you that you need one. He wrapped it around his left hand and came to you after pointing out the water canyon. Today, he again wanted to show you the spirit catcher, as he did the first time you met him. It was wise of you to stop. The ally was going too fast for your strength, and a direct jolt with him would be very injurious to you. How can I get a spirit catcher now? Apparently the ally is going to give you one himself. How? I don't know. You will have to go to him. He has already told you where to look for it. Where? Over there in those hills where you saw the hole. Would I be looking for the ally himself? No, but he is already welcoming you. The little smoke has opened your way to him. Then later on, you will meet him face to face, and that will happen only after you know him very well. End of chapter.